Thank you for having me. My name is Daniel. I'm originally from the US, but I've spent 25 years in Europe, and I've watched the regulatory environment grow and change over the past 20 some odd years. Currently, I'm in Malta, and I'm here representing a startup that we're kicking off called MVC. It stands for Minimum Viable Compliance. And what we're going to talk about here is about the problem, right? The problem is that startups and even scale-ups to a large extent are being introduced to new cybersecurity laws that they've never known about before because they're novel. And I'll give you an example of one that's a big one, and actually the reason why we started all this, that's the Cyber Resilience Act. Now, if you haven't heard of the Cyber Resilience Act, it's about time you do, because it was passed in December of 2024, and it means that all products with digital elements, including software and libraries, now have to carry the CE marking, which means that manufacturers are now going to have to perform the act of declaring conformity, which means assembling a lot of evidence that says that they are in conformity with the expectations of the Cyber Resilience Act, which means that you have to have pre-market obligations like securely designing your product. You have to provide for things like secure updates, and even post-market activities. You have to monitor your product's health on the market and provide free updates for 5 years. And you have to keep all this documentation for 10 years. And I think, it's easy to say all this stuff as a regulator, to say, hey, businesses, this is what you have to do now. But what I've seen firsthand in my work at the ESO of ETSI, the European Telecommunication Standardization Institute, where I'm actually writing several of the harmonized vertical standards, is that there's a very big difference in awareness between hardware manufacturers, like those that make smartphones, and software manufacturers, those who make apps for these smartphones. Those involved in hardware understand that there are regulations to import things into Europe. You get stopped at the border, you're getting inspected, but software has never had that problem before. It means that whole new teams have to be spawned and created. And the worst thing you can have as a startup is not knowing what you're getting yourself into. And so this is the problem that we face, that other startups are facing, and even large organizations such as Google, who I happened to meet a couple of weeks ago, are still unaware of the obligations that are going to be imposed upon them as importers of products with digital elements to Europe. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to find all of these tricky touch points for startups to help them rapidly get their products onto the European market. And I guess you could consider us to be like a concierge. We know what you have to do because we're involved in writing the standards. We've been involved in the open source community, and we know exactly what you have to do. So I think you could consider us to be like the legal layer of performing the compliance activities for your product for the entire lifetime of the product. And the deadline, the dead deadline, is December of 2027. But what I've found working with larger companies, both inside and outside of Europe, is that the bigger concern is everything that's currently on the market also has to comply starting in September of 26. And earlier in the meeting today, we were talking about the interactions of all of these various pieces of legislation, and it's really true. You have the Cyber Resilience Act, you have the Product Liability Directive, you have the Digital Services Act version 2, which is coming out soon. You have the Omnibus package rewriting everything except the CRA. You have NIS2 for large companies. And in Germany, for example, NIS2 requires not only that you as a company register yourself, you also have to have an ISO 27001 certificate. Like the interplay of all these regulations is now only getting compounded with AI. And I'll paint you a horror story. Let's say you're a small company, you have an app on the App Store, and you're not paying attention to any of this because no one's telling you about it because, compliance, GDPR, it's just a checkmark exercise. On December 10th, 2027, Apple is going to have a checkbox on its page where you manage your product, where you have to upload your declaration of conformity, your user manual in 27 different languages, or 26. You have to also have your software bill of materials, your cybersecurity risk assessment, your architectural diagrams, these all have to be prepared. And if you're not prepared, then Apple will take you off the market. And I think the biggest risk for SMEs today isn't that you're going to get fined. That's fines, they might happen. We all know that the regulators are overworked. Getting to a fine takes time. But what they can do, what the Market Surveillance Authority can do, is they can take your product off the market. And that's a fine you can't afford. Just for not being compliant. And the compliance check is really easy. Either you have the CE marking or you don't. And if you don't, then you're off the market. And if you're off the market, you can't make sales in Europe. So I think the important thing to remember for us is that, where I come from a software heritage. I've been working in open source for 2 decades, and some of my open source projects are in use at Microsoft, at Tencent, at NASA, at Intel. Pretty much every company out there is now using some of the open source that I've built. And this has led me to working with Etsy. This has led me to advising the European Commission with regard to the attestation processes for open source. And I'm writing books about this all the time. So I'm bringing out my 3rd book on the matter. I'm literally one of the very few experts in this field in Europe. I'd say we're a couple hundred people. We are able to put all of this together for you in one small package that is mostly self-assessment. We guide you down this process of helping you get your product compliant with the Cyber Resilience Act, but we also have additional services that can fulfill needs. I'll give you an example. If you have a default product on the European market, you're going to have to perform an assessment that a certain requirement that mitigates a risk has been met. This assessment should create evidence that shows that you've fulfilled the expectations. If you cannot create this evidence, we have a team of testing specialists who can help you do that. And this isn't just for the CRA. Some of you who might know the Radio Equipment Directive, you've probably also heard of the EUCC. And these are different methods by which we can help your product attain this beautiful CE marking. And this is just a mock-up of the app where your users and the market surveillance authorities can come to verify that your product is compliant, because we have this weird scenario where you're expected to put a CE marking on a virtual thing, a digital product, a digital piece of software. So the business model here is important for you to remember, because if you're a startup and you are just testing the waters, there are carve-outs for beta products. But the moment you sell, the moment you're on the market, you have obligations for a decade. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to make that transparent to you, but also affordable, because we don't want to make compliance the big monster that it feels like it is. We want it just to be accessible and normal. And I think, the challenge isn't just in Europe, right? Like, from an internal European perspective, the people that I talk to, like, oh, okay, it's the new regulation, we're going to have to do this. It also comes from outside, right? And a lot of voices that are very loud on LinkedIn are saying, oh, this is just another, policy theater from Europe. But what I know is that Japan is copying the Cyber Resilience Act. India and Canada, they're copying EIDAS. So the Brussels effect isn't just suggesting things like the CCPA or, how the FedRAMP works with software bills of materials. It's actually really literally exporting compliance such that we're coming to a world where entities who are manufacturing products outside of Europe are looking for ways to have what we call mapping between the various regulations. And this is something that we're experts in. Just a small note before I sign off, and this is, I think, a giveaway for everyone out there. You probably heard that Google expects all of cryptography to be broken by 2029. ENISA and the Accepted Cryptographic Methodologies paper up until now has said you have until 2030 to have your cryptography hybrid, which means part quantum robust, part classical. The problem is Google expects AI to now fast track that, such that if you don't have a quantum secure system in place already today, you're going to be facing very serious problems, because it's going to happen and there won't be warning. And what that means is all historical cryptography will be broken. So I think that the thing that we want to do is we want to make all of this simple and transparent and scalable and strategic for you, so that you can worry about your business instead of worrying about compliance. That was, I think, a 10-minute talk. I hope I was able to address a lot of the concerns. I think in this deck, one thing that doesn't appear is our conference. The next one is going to be in May in Malta. If you are in Malta, I recommend stopping by the Malta Digital Innovation Authority, who is hosting a standards roadshow. And that's where we talk about how the standardization process is going with ETSI and with Sensenelec. On the Friday, we have a semi-private event for master's students coming from the Sorbonne to Malta to learn about how future businesses will be impacted by the AI Act, by the next version of the CSA, and so on and so forth. And then our flagship event is going to be in October in Malta. Along the way, you'll probably see us at this, that, or the other conference. We do run small side events at things like the London Tech Week or at GITEX, Dev World, those kind of places. Please, if you do see us, stop by. Happy to get into a deeper conversation with you. Thank you.